Hi everybody, this is Mr. Vanderpool, and our objective for today is to review over supply and demand curves in preparation for the AP Macroeconomics test. So let's start off by talking about market equilibrium. So when quantity supply is equal to quantity demanded, there is equilibrium in the market, and equilibrium creates a single price and quantity for a good or service. So let's take a look at an example supply and demand curve along with market equilibrium. So we can see here on our y-axis we have price, which is represented by the variable P. On our x-axis we have quantity, which is represented by the variable Q. We have an upward sloping curve as we go left to right called supply, which is represented by the variable S. We have a downward sloping curve as we go left to right, which is our demand curve, which is represented by the variable D. And where both of those curves intersect, you have an equilibrium price and you have an equilibrium quantity. So this is a basic supply and demand graph. Now there are 4 steps in figuring out supply and demand graphs. The first one is to not overthink. Second one, think which curve is affected and why. Is the supply curve affected or is the demand curve affected? And say to yourself, is it an increase or a decrease in supply or demand? If it's an increase, the curve shifts to the right. Decrease, curve shifts to the left. And just draw it. Go ahead and shift that curve, shift the correct curve. Tell me what happens to equilibrium price and what happens to equilibrium quantity. Now I want to go ahead and review over the determinants of demand. These are the 5 variables that can cause the entire demand curve to shift. Now remember when we talked about this, we talked about the acronym TRIPE. TRIPE stands for the 5 determinants of demand, which are changes in taste and preferences, changes in related goods, complements and substitutes, changes in income, changes in population, and expectations of future price changes. These 5 variables, when they shift, will shift an entire demand curve. We also have the determinants of supply. These are the 7 variables that will shift an entire supply curve, and that's represented by the acronym NICE-JAG. So NICE-JAG stands for Natural Man-Made Phenomenon, changes in input costs, competition, expectations, profitability of alternative goods and supply, profitability of goods in joint supply, and government action. Now let's go ahead and look at a scenario here. So our market is going to be oranges, and here you can see we have a typical supply and demand graph for oranges. So our price is going to be on our y-axis. On our x-axis, you're going to have quantity. You're going to have your downward sloping demand curve, your upward sloping supply curve. And where they intersect, you're going to have your equilibrium price and your equilibrium quantity. So our scenario here is what happens to the market for oranges when there is a frost that hits Florida. So the first thing we have to figure out is, based on the scenario, is a variable in TRIPE going to be affected, or is a variable in NICE-JAG going to be affected? So here in the scenario, we can see we have a decrease in the physical availability of resources. This, of course, is the variable N, natural resources, which is a part of NICE-JAG. So therefore, supply is going to be affected. Now we have to figure out, do we have an increase or decrease in supply? We can see here that because of this frost, a bunch of oranges are going to be destroyed. So therefore, we're going to have a decrease in supply. The supply curve is going to shift to the left from S to S1. Now we have a new equilibrium where our old demand curve hits S1. So we're going to have a new equilibrium price, P1, a new equilibrium quantity, Q1. So you can see here that the equilibrium price went up and the equilibrium quantity went down for oranges when a frost hit Florida. Now let's look at one more scenario here. So our market is downloaded music. So it says here, what happens to the market for downloaded music when the price of an MP3 player or iPod goes down? So the first thing we have to figure out is this: with this scenario, does it affect the variables in TRIPE or the variables in NICE-JAG? So what we have here is we have a decrease in the price of a complement. A complement is a part of related goods, which is part of trade. So demand is going to be affected. Now we need to look at this scenario. We can see that the price of the MP3 player and iPod went down. So therefore people are going to be buying more of those things. When they buy more of those things, they're going to want to buy more downloaded music. So therefore the demand for downloaded music is going to go up. So we're going to have a rightward shift in the demand curve from D to D1. Now, we have a new equilibrium price, P1, a new equilibrium quantity, Q1. So as you can see here, when the price of an MP3 player or iPod went down, the equilibrium price for downloaded music went up. The equilibrium quantity of downloaded music also went up. Thank you very much.